So it has been 2 months since I did the last hot takes video, and I apologize for that. I promise I'm gonna start trying to do them more consistently now, at the very least bi-weekly, and then on top of this, I also want to start a Q&A series, but that's a different topic. Anyways though, welcome, hot takes number 30. As always, if you have any controversial opinions or hot takes about LEGO Star Wars, make sure to go ahead and drop them down in the comments below for a chance to be featured on the next episode whenever I do it. Anyways though, hopping right into it, this first one comes from the British CAC. I guess that's how you say your name. It kind of sounds like a slur. Anyways, he says there's seriously nothing wrong with modern clone troopers. And you guys know I disagree with this, and I'm gonna continue to disagree with it, even though that's kind of a hot take in itself. I think it really comes down to when you started collecting LEGO Star Wars. If you're someone that started collecting in like 2021 or 2022, and these modern clone troopers are all you've known in terms of clone troopers, then you're probably fine with them and don't think much of them at all. But for people like me that have collected for a lot longer than that and are accustomed to the clone troopers that we used to get from 2014 to 2020, these new clone troopers just simply don't look as good. They're not bad, the older ones are just better. And I'm not talking about old clone troopers as in the Clone Wars era or the early 2000s, because that's just straight nostalgia bias. I'm talking about the mid to late 2010s. That's when I think clone troopers truly peaked. It's kind of like we went from great to alright when we should have stayed at great. And obviously the two main differences are the helmet holes and the waist capes. Now I do think helmet holes are slightly more excusable than waist capes, because they definitely were a step in the right direction in terms of an upgrade for these Phase 2 clone troopers. However, LEGO kind of did it in the worst way possible because of where they placed the helmet holes, and it's not like they placed them up higher for no reason. The reason they did this is because if they placed them down lower, the visors and macro binoculars and other attachments would not have enough room to rotate above the top of the helmet. And that's why I say the helmet holes are a bit more excusable, because that is a valid reason. And also, when the helmets have attachments on, they look really good. It's just that when you have the modern helmet with no attachments on it and you compare it to the older modern helmet, it looks pretty ugly, and I'm gonna stand by that. I think it looks ugly. So because of that, I really wish LEGO didn't sacrifice the aesthetic look of this helmet to make the helmet holes work. Since the visor not being able to rotate around the top of the helmet is a problem, they should have just redesigned the entire mold, which is something that custom clone trooper companies do really well. So yeah, I appreciate the playability that these helmet holes have added. However, I don't think LEGO did it in the right way, because with no helmet attachments on, these helmets are very ugly. Now the waist capes, on the other hand, really don't have any excuses. There is literally no reason to not have a physical waist cape on these figures. If them getting crumbled when you sit the figure down is that big of a deal, or if kids have too much trouble trying to put it on, they can simply just not use them, but they should still be included in the set. There's just no reason not to do that. And I also just hate how the printed waist capes look. They just make the legs look sloppy. They hardly even resemble a waist cape. So yeah, I think these ones are fine, but the older ones are better, and the helmet holes are kind of excusable, even though I don't think LEGO did them in the best way, and then the waist capes are not excusable. This next one comes from Hesbricks. He says the UCS Death Star is good, and thank you so much for saying this, because I agree with you. The main reason people are still hating on this is just because it wasn't what we were expecting. We all wanted a sphere, and we didn't get a sphere. We got sort of a slice of the Death Star. However, I'm not gonna lie, LEGO pulled this off really well, and I think it looks leagues better than the previous two playscale models. As a matter of fact, I've never liked those playscale designs. I've always just thought they looked kind of ugly and unappealing and hardly even resembled the Death Star. The main reason people like them so much is one, because they're nostalgic, and also because for so many years this was the only available design of the Death Star we had. But again, I've never really liked them. Now I can appreciate them for being iconic and their status in the history of LEGO Star Wars, but they've really just never been my forte. The 2005 Death Star 2 was a bit of a different story though. I'm honestly still on the fence of which one of these two sets I think is better, because for one, the 2005 Death Star is the only fully enclosed Death Star that we have. However, at the same time, it's obviously very dated in 2025. The model's pretty flimsy. There's also quite a few gaps in between the panels around the build, but then you have this newer one which isn't a sphere. It's kind of a slice, but it still looks really good. So again, I'm on the fence of which one of these two sets I think is better, but at the very least, I agree with your comment. I think this new one looks really good, and it's definitely better than those playscale designs. Continuing on with Death Star related takes, this next one comes from Evergreen Oil Tanker. He says, just because it's the Death Star doesn't mean it should be $1,000. And well, there's a few arguments to kind of combat this, and the first one is, well, this technically isn't the first $1,000 set. Like everyone has pointed out, the UCS Falcon from 2017 adjusted for inflation comes out to about $1,050. And then the obvious argument is, oh, well, that set's still on shelves and it's still $850. They haven't raised its price to adjust for inflation. And yeah, the same thing is gonna apply for this Death Star. It's gonna be on shelves for a long time, and in 7 or 8 years, it's still gonna be $1,000. It's not gonna be what the inflated number of $1,000 would be 7 years from now. And also, we knew a $1,000 set was gonna come out at some point. I mean, this has been in discussion for like at least the past 10 years, and it makes perfect perfect sense for it to be the Death Star. I mean, really, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to pick the Death Star for the first $1,000 LEGO set. But the question is this right here worth $1,000? And I know this is going to be a hot take, but I think it is. First of all, this set is ginormous, and I don't really think people are grasping how big this thing actually is. It's 27.5 inches tall, 33 inches wide, and 10 inches deep. So the diameter of it is a little bit bigger than the Millennium Falcon, and the Millennium Falcon is about 8 inches tall. However, most of that height actually comes from just the landing gear. So if you take two Falcons and remove their landing gear and then stack them on top of each other like pancakes, then you're getting close to the size of this Death Star. And then when you look at its piece count of 9,000 pieces and then look at previous UCS sets and what they did with the prices and piece counts on them, LEGO really probably could have got away with charging a little bit over $1,000 on this set, maybe $1,100. For example, the UCS Star Destroyer has a little over half the piece count of this Death Star, except that set was $700 in 2019, and obviously $700 doubled is not $1,000, it's $1,400. And then there's some other examples like the Sail Barge having 3,900 pieces for $500. So yeah, I really do think that this does look like a $1,000 set. And also $1,000 is just a better looking price tag, if that makes sense. It's kind of a marketing thing. It looks better for YouTube titles, for news headlines, etc, etc. I don't really know the best way to describe it. It's kind of just you understand it or you don't. But regardless, I do think the Death Star was the perfect and really only choice for the first $1,000 LEGO Star Wars set. Anyways though, moving away from Death Star and Clone Trooper discussion, this next one comes from Saver Prods. He says the buildable 2017 figures were so hated on. They were actually very cool to collect. And I never got into these. I still to this day have no interest in them. However, I do have to say some of them do look really cool, especially the troopers like Commander Cody and some of the stormtroopers, and especially the range trooper from Solo. I think those are actually really cool sets. The problem with these though is that people that wanted to collect LEGO weren't looking to collect action figure type sets. If people wanted action figures or characters of this size, they could have just went and bought some Black Series. So from a business standpoint, it just seemed kind of ridiculous for LEGO to try to make these work, and in the end they didn't work. LEGO canceled them because they weren't selling for the reason I just pointed out. But like you mentioned, I do think some of them were cool, especially the troopers. If there is any I'd get, it'd probably be Commander Cody. This next one comes from Guy That Plays a Piano. He says we need more Rebellion battle packs that just have Rebel troopers and vehicles. And I agree with you. I've been saying this for years now. LEGO has neglected Rebel battle packs and really just Rebellion sets in general besides like X-Wings for so long, and I don't understand why. I mean, I guess they don't sell very well, but at the very least they're awesome. The 2016 Battlefront Rebel battle pack is literally one of my all-time personal favorite battle packs. I'm not saying it's one of the all-time best, but I definitely have a personal bias towards this set. I think it's awesome. Same thing goes for the Rogue One Rebel battle pack and the one that came out in 2008. I think they're all just great sets. And of course, I would love to see modern Rebel battle packs with modern Rebel ground troopers and modern Rebel speeders. I think LEGO could pull it off really well, but for some reason they just kind of neglect the Rebellion, and it's really disappointing. I mean, the fact that we've literally gotten what, only 3 Rebel battle packs in the past 19 years is kind of sad, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, I agree with your comment. I too really want more Rebel battle packs. This next one is a good one. It comes from Big Apple. He says the new turbo tank is the most aesthetically accurate one we've received so far, and I'm not gonna lie, I agree with you. I'm not saying this set is good. I'm not saying the build is accurate, but in terms of just strictly an aesthetic standpoint, it looks really, really good. And I briefly touched on this in my review of the set, but from some angles, this set is very aesthetically pleasing. Now, the 2016 Turbo Tank is not far behind it. I think that set also looks very aesthetically pleasing, mainly just because, in my opinion, in shaping and detail, it is the most accurate Turbo Tank they've made. But I'm just talking about looks here. Obviously, in terms of overall playability and just an overall set, the 2010 Turbo Tank is pretty much always going to take the cake. But in terms of just aesthetics, this 2025 one is up there, if not the best. And the 2016 one is right below it, if not tied with it. But again, I'm not saying this 2025 model is a good set. There's still tons of problems with it. It's overpriced, it's fragile, there are inaccuracies, but at the very least, the model does look pretty good. This next one comes from Loose Fuse, I guess that's how you say your name. He says LEGO Star Wars pre-2004 was better, more toyish, more fun, and more creative. And yeah, I hate to break it to you, bro, but this is pure nostalgia bias. You kind of have a point with them being more toyish and more creative, but in terms of just overall quality, I don't think the early 2000s was really where Star Wars peaked. I mean, don't get me wrong, these sets are amazing, they're nostalgic, they're very fun, and they're cool looking, and they have cool figures, and on and on and on. But I think in terms of actual quality, well, kind of like how I mentioned with the Clone Troopers, I really do think the quality of builds peaked from 2013 to 2020 as well. Now, I'm not saying the builds they're making today are bad, bad? Well, besides the turbo tank, they're making lots of great builds today. They're highly detailed, they're the most structural sound they've ever been, but I think an overall build quality considering playability, the size of the models, and how they looked really did peak in the mid to late 2010s, just like the clone troopers. But yeah, definitely not pre-2004. I respect your opinion though, even though it's nostalgia bias. This next one comes from Zip0YT. He says, I don't think the newer sets, while overpriced, aren't as overpriced as people think, and a lot of the prices actually make sense to me. And well, I'm glad they make sense to you, but they don't make sense to me or a lot of other people either. And actually, I just made an entire video objectively proving these sets are overpriced, because I mean, they are. The battle pack is about $23 higher than it should be, the MTT is about $40 higher than it should be, and the turbo tank's about $50 higher than it should be. And this is all objectively proven in that video I made a few days ago, so you can go ahead and watch that if you want to. Anyways though, this last one comes from FTKQ123. He says, prequel fatigue is really setting in. Sequel sets should be getting remade. And about that last part, I would like more sequel sets, I guess, because the vehicles and troopers are cool, but I'd honestly rather just have more OT play sets. But about prequel fatigue setting in, I agree with you, and I think it settled in a long time ago. And it's not even because we're getting so many prequel sets, it's just because the prequel sets they've been making haven't been the greatest. I mean, every set just has so many little problems, specifically with the minifigures, but then some with the builds, like the turbo tanks, and it has really just caused endless negativity towards these sets and drama within the community. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the negativity and complaints towards these sets is valid, but there's just so much of it, and it's caused so much drama that, like, I am too getting kind of tired of it. And since LEGO clearly doesn't care to make these sets better, I wish they'd just make more sets from other eras, like you mentioned sequel sets, but me personally, I'd rather have more OT sets. Anyways though, that is going to do it for this video. As always, if you have any hot takes or controversial opinions about LEGO Star Wars, make sure to drop them down in the comments below. If you're new, please consider subscribing, and if you want to check out more videos, you see on the screen right now.